Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual meeting for Tuesday, March 25th. I would call the meeting to order by resolution. Madam Clerk.
It's moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Gardner, that the special meeting of the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry be hereby called to order.
Thank you. County councillors, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome all the staff and councillors from our lower tier municipalities to here joining us this evening. So welcome to every one of you. I would ask all the staff members to please turn off your video and mute your microphones at the same time, if you would, please. So it'll be just county council and members of council from the lower tier municipalities that could be on at this present time, because I can't see everyone. Okay, so if there's any questions or any feedback that you want to give, I would ask that you please raise your hand in the chat box so that I can see it at some point, and we'll get to you as soon as we possibly can. And I'd ask the Madam Clerk to do a roll call on county council members, please.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Bivalds.
Present.
Councillor Fraser.
Present.
Councillor Gardner.
Present.
Councillor Laundrie.
Present.
Councillor McDonald.
Present.
Councillor McGillis.
Present.
Warden Prevost.
Present.
Councillor Smith. I believe he's going to be a bit late. Councillor Warden.
Present.
Councillor Wirt.
Present.
Councillor Williams.
Okay, thank you. And adoption of the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda? Not seeing none. If we can have an adoption, please.
Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Laundrie, that council approve the agenda.
Okay, County Council, you heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof?
No, but
Go ahead. Can't hear you, Dave.
I just joined the meeting. I just got in a little late.
Yeah, that's fine. She'll recognize that you're present now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to number 4, the agenda items, regional waste management study, introduction of the project, presentation of phase 1 and 2 study findings, and the roundtable discussion. I'll ask Mr. DeHaan to introduce the item and to begin the presentation, if you would, please.
Thank you, and thank you all for attending this evening. It's such a beautiful evening out there. I can imagine that that some of us are, wishing we were outside enjoying this nice weather. So I'm going to be sharing my screen very shortly, and this presentation that you'll see is really going to guide our discussion this evening. Perhaps if I could get a thumbs up that it's actually displayed, that would be greatly appreciated. Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. This evening we're talking about the regional waste management study that the county is leading right now. Very quickly, with this study, we are, and excuse me while I just get this sorted out. In terms of introductions, I want to first off thank all of the local staff that have been key participants in this study. And I particularly want to give a shout out to Linda and Chris and Blake, Ross, Danielle, and Doug. And I think I was trying to take a peek in all the participants. And I think
has joined the meeting.
I think most are here tonight, so thank you very much. And then of particular note, I want to thank Ross and Danielle for being on the project steering committee. So they're really involved in more of the minutia. We've utilized both the local waste management staff and then Ross and Danielle in particular to help kind of guide this project as it's gone forward. And lastly, wanted to say hello and thank you to DFA Infrastructure International, and that's Derek Ali, who will be doing a bulk of the presentation this evening, just going over where we are with our study right now. The question you might have is, how did we get here? And the answer to that is a multitude of reasons. One being that we, the county, whenever this council was elected and came to county council, we set out a strategic plan. And two of those items in that strategic plan, I think, fit very nicely and kind of guide ourselves in terms of where our council and how we want to lead within the region. There's two particular parts of our strategic plan, which I think are important to note and keep in mind, and identifies why we're here. Those two are that we identified that partnerships are essential for our success. And that part of that is just collaboration and trying to find collaboration where we can to achieve the best results for all of our residents. And the other part of it too is the environmental legacy that we set forth and leave behind for our region. And that was a key component of our strategic plan as well. Backing up a little bit, we were asked to lead a waste management study, and the impetus for that was that, you know, it's obviously a very complex file, and I'm sure you see that around your local council tables all the time, but it is such a complex file and complex issue, and we are getting close to a time whenever we see a radical change in the industry, and that's specifically that there's going to be a transition to producer responsibility. So it was brought to our attention that this was coming, and really felt like this was the ideal time, because of that major change, to actually look at waste management as a whole within the region and identify areas where we can collaborate, improve, and just really get a sense of how we're all doing with waste management within our respective local municipalities. So we were the lead on it, and we scoped out this study with participation from all of the local waste management staff members, and put forward a RFP. DFA was the successful proponent, and they've been leading this study, I guess authoring this study since that time. And in that light, we're ready to start sharing where we are. And after we're done sharing kind of where we are in the report, we'll be looking for input from all of you that are here today in terms of where we're going to take it going forward, because we've identified a bunch of, I think, opportunities that we could consider, and we really want to understand if council agrees with where we'd like to go. So on that light, I'm going to switch it over to Derek. I'm going to put myself on mute. Derek will be doing the discussing, and I'm going to keep control of the slides, and Derek will be just letting me know when to switch between slides. So Derek, I'll throw it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Can you hear me okay? Good. Good evening, members of council, and it's my pleasure to be here this evening just to present to you where we are with the information on the waste management study. So what I'd like to do tonight, it's go through, it's a lot of information, but we've tried to condense it down to some slides that would sort of by and large give you the information as to where we are, some of the costs around what each local municipality is doing at the moment. So, and then as Ben indicated, we'd like to get some, the idea is to get some feedback at the end of it all. Now, the information that you will see on these slides coming forward is based on the individual municipalities and where they are with waste management. They each have different levels of service, different nuances to their programs, and therefore their costs are all going to be different. So I think when you see the information coming forward, you'll get a better sense of that. Next slide, please, Ben. So the purpose of the study here is really to see where there might be opportunities to enhance collaboration, try to get better efficiencies, maybe deliver the services a little bit better going forward. And as Ben indicated, there's a major shift in the industry coming in for the counties and the municipalities within the counties in 2025, and that is the transition of recycling over to the producers. And And as a result of that, that's a major, recycling has been done by municipalities for 30 odd years, 35 years perhaps. So that is a major shift. So if you're going to collaborate, now's the time to start looking at how best that might work for you going forward. So where we are right now with this study, we've completed phases 1 and 2, and that's the focus of this presentation. And then after this, we'll be going on to phases 3 and 4, which is really looking at the collaboration opportunities. And then once those are sort of defined, we can look at an implementation strategy. Next slide, please, Ben. So in terms of the waste management systems, this slide gives you a bit of a snapshot as to, who's doing what across the local municipalities. And you can see for waste collection, we've got weekly curbside collection is sort of standard across the board. We've got 3 municipalities doing collection in-house, 3 outsourced collections, so they're contracted services. And they all have each municipality has some sort of drop-off facility for residents who wish to bring stuff from their homes to the landfill or maybe to the works yard, or not use the curbside service for convenience. In terms of the recycling collection, that's a little bit different. We've got 3 municipalities with bi-weekly single stream collection and 3 with 2-stream collection. And of that, you've got 2 outsourced on the 2-stream collection and 1 outsourced on the single stream bi-weekly collection. So you can begin to see where there are differences in how the recycling is being approached right now, and that sort of holds true for other parts of the program. In terms of the processing, there 2 of the municipalities, there's one into what I'll call an internal MRF, which is the recycling processing facility. That's owned by one of the municipalities, and that's North Glengarry. And then there are 2 other MRFs that are used by the municipalities. One is the Cornwall MRF, and 4 of the municipalities use that one. And then there is the WMI MRF, which is in Belleville, and 1 municipality uses that. Other diversion programs, such as leaf and yard waste collection, they're sort of delivered to different levels of service, different number of days per year, different times of the year. There's scrap metal collection and all, battery collection, wood waste, composting, that sort of thing. So it varies by municipality. On the disposal side, we've got 6 landfills that are owned within the region, and they are owned by 5 of the municipalities. So 1 municipality has 2 landfills. And then there is 1 private landfill site, as I'm sure you're aware of, and 3 of the 6 municipalities currently use that site. And over the course of the next 10 years or so, a 4th municipality is going to begin using that site if we continue on the road we are right now. I'll talk a little bit about the assumptions once we get a little bit more into the presentation that we've made around looking at some of the costs. In terms of the closed sites, there's 7 closed sites, and North Stormont has 2 of those. And you'll see that those are, in terms of the future and costs, in the future costs, those represent almost an indefinite liability over a very long period of time. Next slide, please. In terms of current contracts, we've got 4 waste collection contracts, 3 recycling contracts, the recycling collection contracts, 5 contracts for processing, 4 with Cornwall, 1 with WMI, and then you've got North Glengarry in-house, 3 contracts with the landfill site, and on the landfill site monitoring, there are 6 contracts. So there you begin to see where there's several contracts across the 6 municipalities for similar services. So when you start looking ahead, there may be opportunities to perhaps look at collaboration and even in tendering contracts and things of the like. So I'm just making those statements right now, but you can look at those more closely as you think about how you'd wish to collaborate going forward. Next slide, please. So this slide represents the current assets that each municipality holds, and it's basically a combination of recycling trucks, waste collection trucks, the landfill assets, which would be things like the monitoring wells. There's some buildings on site, some landfill compacting equipment. And you'll see there with the recycling, there is the North Glengarry has a large chunk of the assets in terms of value because it owns the MRF. There's a lot of equipment, balers, conveyor belts, etc., the building, and so on. So the assets in total, this is based on the asset database that's currently held by each municipality and the values around those assets. It's around 16 million that you hold today. This does not include the value of the landfill space that you have available to be used going forward. So that's a different sort of calculation if it gets to the need for that to be calculated. Next slide, please, Ben. In terms of staffing, there are about 16.7 FTEs that are dedicated to solid waste. You would see in the 2 right columns there, most of those are non-union. There's a half position that's a unionized position. And to the left, you will see there's the shared staff. Now, the shared staff would be staff who are at perhaps a director, manager level, supervisor level, non-union, who also has responsibilities in areas other than solid waste. And on that side, there are probably about 18 and a half positions in total. So the only municipality right now that has a dedicated staff group is North Dundas, with about 6.5 positions in there. And they're fully dedicated to the delivery of solid waste within that particular municipality. Next slide, please. Looking at the population, stops and tons. Now, this information is important in terms of, particularly for collection, where very often the collection is based on the number of stops, the cost of collection. So the more stops there are, the longer it takes, and therefore perhaps the more trucks and so on and so forth. So this slide gives an indication of how many stops there are across the region by municipality. And you'll see that it shows around 27,000 stops. So each week for garbage collection, there are 27,000 stops that trucks make. And whether it's an individual municipality in-house or contracted service, in total, it's about 27,000. In terms of waste disposal, it's about somewhere around 17,500 tons of waste that's disposed of each year. So about 40% of that right now is at the private landfill, and 60 at municipal landfills. And you will see going forward on another slide that that will change as you move into over the next 10, 15, 20 years going forward. Waste diversion is about 3,800 tons at the moment. and that's waste from through the recycling program, other diversion programs. Next slide, please. So this slide has a lot going on, and it sort of gives the intent here is to give you a sense of what's coming between now and the next 25 years. And you will see in the middle, there's an arrow that goes from 2020 to 2056. Our study period that we are looking at is from 2020 to 2024. And during that time, there's going to be some changes. And then next year, there's the expansion at the Boyne Road landfill site that's being sought at the moment. Technically, that site is due to be closed in 2022. 2023, you've got the Matilda site that's due to be closed. And South Dundas is seeking an expansion of that site as well. And as you go along that arrow in 2025, there's North Lancaster, then the Trillium, and the Beaverbrook by 2033. So in about 10 years or so, you could have 4 to 5 landfill sites closing. Now, aside from that, there's the shift in the responsibility for recycling, and municipalities will be responsible up until 2025. At this point, we are not sure exactly when in 2025 that the municipalities will transition to producer responsibilities, but we have assumed for the purposes of this exercise that it'll be the end of 2025, so it's December 31st. And then beyond that, it will be the producers who would be in charge of the recycling program. So one of the issues and questions there is how much of a role do the municipalities wish to play going forward beyond 2025? Because you would get to things like the level of service, is it going to be the same? Are all the sectors going to be serviced? We're not quite sure how that's going to roll out at the moment. So all municipalities within the region are going to transition at the same time. And therefore, there'll be the need to coordinate that transition among the 6 municipalities. And you'll see at the bottom there, it shows the remaining landfill capacity. It's about 115,000 tons. With the expansions that are being sought at the 2 landfill sites, that could pretty much double to around 240,000 tons over that period, over the 25-year period. Ben? Next slide, please, Ben. Thanks. So between, this is what I was sort of alluding to earlier, between now and 2044, in 2020, you've got about 17,600 tons of waste being disposed. 61% of that is at local municipal landfills. 39% is at the private landfill. And as you go through time, that's going to shift where you're going to have an increase in the tonnage being disposed to about 20,100 tons. And that's due to growth within the communities, customer growth. And the shift is going to be that more of the waste is going to be disposed at the private landfill site, about 58% compared to the municipal sites at 42%. So looking at the track that the municipalities are on right now, over the next 10, 15 years or so, most of your waste will be going to a site other than the municipal sites that exist today. So it would be likely the private facility that's located in the region. Next slide, please, Ben.
Derek, before we go any further, I do have a question from one of our members of County Council. I would ask Councillor Lyle Warden.
Through you, Mr. Warden. I'm just curious to know, our municipality in South Glengarry, we have currently 2 operating landfills, North Lancaster and Beaverbrook Road. We have as a council have not stated that we would be shifting any of our waste to a private facility. And as far as I'm concerned, we have land, we have tons of room to expand both facilities. So I kind of disagree with the statement in the previous slide, because we as a council in our municipality, speaking just for South Glengarry, we have not had that discussion. So I feel that I just need to say that because we haven't had that discussion yet. So I'm not sure where you got that information.
Through you, Mr. Warden, thanks for the question. That is a good point. What we have assumed, and this is based on conversations with staff at South Glengarry, that once those sites close, there's no plan at the moment to expand or seek extensions for those sites. So the default is that you will have to seek capacity elsewhere. So you're quite right. If it is the decision of the municipality to seek extensions, then yes, of course, those sites will continue to operate and serve the community beyond these dates that are indicated here. But the track you're on right now is the time is going to come and the sites are going to close, and then the only choice would be to go to a private facility, because you need a lot of lead time to get the extensions going forward. So, but you're quite right that that's the case.
Thank you, Councilor Warden.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I mean that's why we're here, right? We're here to kind of get the ball rolling, because we all have our own as a whole, we have to look at this, I feel, as a collective agreement. And I think like South Glengarry, I think we're sitting in a decent situation, but the time is now that we have to plant the seed so that we're not sending our garbage to a private facility, because I believe that we have tons of, pardon the pun, we have lots of room to expand, and I feel we have the time to do it. So we're here with you now to start that process, I feel.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dirk.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there's one other question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Armstrong.
Yeah, no, that's all right, Frank, Mr. Warden. Yeah, just to reiterate and sort of add on to what Councilor Warden was saying, but a little bit of differing with his final summation is, yeah, I obviously, Mr. Ellie, there has to be some assumptions, and you stated what the default is, but the same as with us, we haven't had full discussions, but obviously we're in the process of the expansion. So just to make sure that everyone would be aware, I'm sure you asked fair questions, but if you asked a question of perhaps even of Mr. Froats in our area and said, is there a concrete plan to do, scenario A? The answer would be no, but that doesn't mean the council hasn't had preliminary discussions. We just haven't formalized, as Mr. Warden's saying, we just haven't formalized some things. There may be thoughts at the council table. So for anybody listening, just to make, those are just assumptions being made. That's not in concrete. I mean, we may be going in a completely different direction, or Mr. Warden may be going in a completely different direction. It's not, and in all fairness, I'm sure his staff answered the question completely correctly, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plans for a plan, to use a rather poor wording. Same as at the end, and I don't completely disagree with Councillor Warden, but I don't know that certainly North Dundas is here to listen, and we all believe that there are possibilities for all of us to collaborate, or maybe one or two of us to collaborate on certain best practices all throughout throughout SDG. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's also in concrete that we're here tonight to make sure that we go down path A, that we're all going to collaborate or be in any certain way. I think we're just here to listen and see and have a small discussion on it, but I don't think we're making any sort of concrete decision tonight as to what we're going to do. There's as Mr. Warden said, there's discussions they need to have at their table, and we need to have at ours as well. So let's just mitigate the assumptions and remember that they are simply assumptions. Thank you very much.
Good points, Councillor Armstrong. Thank you. Okay, Derek, go ahead.
Thank you. The next slide, please, Ben.
Sorry, I was flipping between programs here. I apologize. Give me a quick second.
Sure.
All right. There we go.
Okay. So similarly, as we go to between 2020 and 2044, the number of collection stops are also going to increase simply due to growth. And of course, with that, there would be, as a whole, across the board, there would be an increase in cost with waste collection. And of course, recycling. However, as we just discussed, recycling is going to go over to the collection is going to be the responsibility of the producers from 2026 onward. So we'll see how that what's coming with respect to that and how it will be rolled out. Next slide, please, Ben. So here we start looking at the cost. Now, these costs are based on 2020 budgets with inflationary increases for the operating costs to arrive at the 2021 numbers that you see in front of you here. Now, the capital costs are also based on the 2020 outlook, and some of those were adjusted depending on more recent discussions with staff about changes to the capital programs. So based on this, you would see that in total, if we were to take the gross operating plus the capital costs for 2021, it's about 9.5 million in total that's being spent this year. Now, I'm sure that some of these budgets have changed, that were approved at council or being considered for approval by the individual councils. But this gives, in orders of magnitude, a pretty good idea as to what the 2021 costs are going to be like. And of that, a large chunk is related to waste disposal, about 43%, and about 30% for is that 20%, sorry, for waste collection. And then, of course, you've got the recycling portion, which would be somewhere around, that's 33% or so, which is going to change after 2025. Next slide, please. So going forward, this slide shows the net present value. So what this means is that we've done a projection of costs for each year between 2021 and 2044 and brought all of that back to 2021 dollars. So you can see from a net present value perspective, if you were to spend all your money this year in waste management for the next 25 years, it'll be around $94 million if you had to spend it all today. And this includes consideration of annual revenues from whether it's recycling over the next 3 years or other revenues that may be derived from operations. It also assumes that any reserve balances that are available in your reserve accounts for the landfill sites or for waste management are also deducted off of your gross costs. So, so this is sort of like a net cost and the present value of that as it stands today. So as a whole, you'd probably be around 94 million, somewhere in that range. And as you can see, looking at the whole period, most of your costs are going to be in the waste collection and waste disposal, with just a small portion in the recycling, and that's due to the fact that we've assumed that the municipalities will not have a responsibility and costs beyond 2025. It also assumes that the closure and post-closure care of the landfill sites goes only up to 2044, and we know that that's really not the case in terms of how it should actually be considered and how it's going to roll out. Our study goes from 2021 to 2044, but the post-closure care of landfill sites extend well beyond, 50 years, well beyond closure. And therefore, there are sites that will close. For example, we were just discussing South Glengarry's that will close in 2033. So they will have post-closure care costs beyond the 2044. Those costs are not included in here. So what I would say is that we've included your closure and post-closure care costs, but it's an underestimate at this point, simply because we've stopped our calculations in 2044 for the purposes of this study. Waste collection costs, these are the costs per curbside stop. And you would see it's split between contracted services and in-house services. And just looking at the numbers, there's no major difference between contracting or in-house. They're all weekly programs, and I'm sure there are reasons for the differences that you see there that exist in these numbers. But on the surface of it, there's nothing that stands out to say that one is perhaps cheaper than the other at this point in time. On the recycling costs, it's a little bit different. The first three columns are the municipalities that currently do the two-stream weekly collection, and then you've got the bi-weekly single-stream collection. And looking at the numbers, you can see where the bi-weekly single-stream is somewhat less than the weekly, and that's simply because of the frequency and the sorting that's associated with the two-stream. This slide shows the disposal and diversion costs, and you would see in the top three rows, there's the waste disposal costs for in-house landfills, for the contracted landfill, and the landfill post-closure care costs. Now, in general terms, the in-house landfill operations are high on a cost per ton basis. And I'd point out that South Stormont is sort of an anomaly because of a high capital cost in 2021 that's included in this calculation. But if you look at the others, they're somewhat higher than the contract landfill costs. And that's likely due to, or one of the reasons is that you've got a much smaller or a much lower tonnage that's going into the municipal landfills relative to the cost being incurred to keep those going. There's, I believe, either one or two landfills, municipalities that operate, that do have an arrangement with the private facility for the curbside disposal of curbside waste. And then they also continue to operate the municipal landfill for the sole purpose of having a place and a convenience for residents to be able to drop off their waste. So, and that's why the cost is perhaps high in some of these instances. And of course, on the recycling, processing, and diversion costs, they vary considerably. And you can see where for North Glengarry, their cost is really high. And that's simply because they actually do the recycling, the processing, and they have all of the costs associated with that. And again, this is gross cost. This does not consider any arrangements they may have for revenues coming in from other municipalities that would help to offset this cost. So in terms of the unit costs on the net present value, looking at this again, it's a sort of indicator to look, when you look at the 25-year period, where are my costs, what are my costs going to be like over that period? This sort of gives an indication
participant
of where
has
things
joined
are
the meeting.
comparing costs. So again, the waste collection is sort of, in the 70, somewhere around the 79 to 86. There's one municipality at 97. So it's not overly different between in-house or contract. But perhaps if there's an arrangement where there's a sharing of services or maybe joint tendering or things like that, or that those costs may be able to come down. There's also the waste disposal cost per ton going forward. Again, the in-house landfills are a bit more expensive than the private landfill for disposal. And you will see there as well that the landfill closure and post-closure care costs are also going up over time. So they're quite a bit higher than was shown for 2021. Next slide, please, Ben. So looking at, given all of that information, there's some challenges in terms of the operations that staff would, be faced with, and to deliver the services, and these include things like there are no waste scales at some of the municipal sites to be able to accurately measure the waste going in. There's, of course, diminishing landfill capacity. So while there are efforts underway at 2 landfill sites for extensions, those come at a cost. And similarly, if South Glengarry were to pursue extensions, there would be an investment required to achieve that. And the rules around the environmental conditions, the approvals from the ministry, all of those would be unique to those landfill sites that would have to be considered. There's also the increasing liability as landfill sites close, and most of that liability remains unfunded at the moment, meaning that once those sites are closed, the continuation of investments in those sites to carry on monitoring remedial works at those sites once they're closed, and there's no tipping fee revenue, those funds would have to be raised through the taxes at that time to be able to pay for those items that would be required for long-term care. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some other issues. Currently, most of the municipalities would have limited resources to be able to go above and beyond in terms of whether it's getting to the extras, if you will, or looking ahead in terms of waste management planning and what might be appropriate for the community. There's a high cost of maintenance of the waste collection trucks. One of the issues too is the waste diversion is currently at a standstill. And that's not unique in that way. Most municipalities sort of get to a certain level and it plateaus at that point unless there's some significant investment in waste diversion, namely organics collection, which is quite high to have very high cost to be able to implement. And then with respect to collaboration, there would also be the need to coordinate any of those activities. So at this point, based on the discussions we've had and and looking at the information, the staff resources are not there to facilitate that at the moment. So that would have to be looked at as well going forward. Now, the recycling transition to the producers, as indicated, all six municipalities will transition at the same time. There's going to be the need for coordinating that transition, building customer awareness, ensuring that people understand what's going to happen with their recycling that's currently picked up, and they're accustomed to the service that they receive today. So there's some education and communication requirements around the transition. There's also, because the producers are going to be responsible, there is potentially an impact to the level of service that people have become accustomed to within the community. So one of the questions there is whether or not the municipalities wish to work with the producers to be able to help deliver a service as a contractor to the producers. Now, that is allowed. We don't know yet how, the specifics of those kinds of arrangements, but it could mean that there would be a cost to the municipalities going forward if you choose to play a role in that regard. There's also the North Glengarry MRF that pretty much is at capacity, and some of the equipment is in need of either repair, upgrading within the next year or two or so. So on that front, it's really limited in terms of capacity and ability to handle additional materials at the moment. So in terms of potential collaboration, you've got possibly having sort of a unified approach to education, communications across the board for transitioning, have some consistency in the messaging and so on to customers. Waste collection, sharing of equipment, staff resources, trying to achieve economies of scale, particularly perhaps in emergency situations. There's also the opportunity to sort of do joint tendering or joint purchasing of vehicles if it's going to be done in-house. Those kinds of options are available. And the big one here is, as I'm sure you're aware of, it's the availability of landfill capacity. And if there's a willingness to look at the capacity as a whole, then there is certainly the opportunity to optimize that capacity, meaning that you don't necessarily have to look for extensions of all the sites at the same time, but perhaps you can manage, and particularly with respect to drop-off facilities for residents. Instead of having all sites be available to residents, maybe that can be, maybe you can have 2 sites available. There may be some drive distances involved and so on. And that's something that could be looked at if there's a willingness to consider that sharing of landfill capacity as an option. There's also the collective approach to accessing private sector capacity instead of doing it individually as municipalities, perhaps as a group. Maybe the negotiating power would be better in that regard. So there's options that could be considered and looked at more closely if you so wish to look at those. And then, of course, there's the opportunity to sort of harmonize the collection services. Right now, they're pretty similar, but there are quite a few differences in terms of simple things like bag limits, frequency of leaf and yard waste pickup, availability of getting rid of large bulky items and things of the like. So you could conceivably have a region-wide across all 6 sort of base level of service with enhancements where needed. Sort of a menu to choose from. That's a possibility. That's been done in other jurisdictions quite successfully. And then on the next slide, please, Ben. And on the so that's on the collaboration side, working together in terms of agreements and so on. The Municipal Act Section 11 allows for 2 or more municipalities to work together to deliver waste management services. Now, that can be for 1 or more services. It can be through 1 or multiple agreements. And you could, if you wish, delegate the authority to a board of management. And there are examples of that sort of structure in the water utility business, where there's some in Ontario that have chosen to have a board of management to look after their water systems as opposed to a municipality. However, that there are also some administrative considerations. If there's a board of management, things like budget approval will be required by all participating municipalities, et cetera, and the sort of timing of those and availability of funds and time and things of the like. So, but those certainly work as options if you so wish, and are allowed under the Municipal Act. Next slide, please, Ben. So under Section 189 of the Municipal Act, there's also the option that if the municipalities so wish, that the counties can become involved in the delivery of waste management services and take that responsibility on. And instead of having a board, the county can become involved. In that case, that sort of decision would require a triple, what is referred to as a triple majority, which means a majority of county council, a majority of the municipalities that comprise the county must vote in favor of that. And also those that vote in favor must represent a majority of the population that live within the county. So that's sort of a triple majority. Now, once, if that's the route you wish to go, then the counties will pass a bylaw that would assume responsibility for waste management. Now, some of the issues around that would be things like compensation for landfill capacity, and these are all requirements under the Act. There's some discussion about some pieces of the Act were, I guess, repealed in 2002, but some of the legislation that referred to those pieces still exists and is still enforceable. So based on that, the issues of compensation for assets, compensation for liabilities, staff transfers, all of those need to be addressed. And there's some very specific requirements for staff transfers to ensure that any staff who may be working directly involved with waste management today, if there's a move to the county, then they will be guaranteed employment under the county regime and things of the like. So all of those things would have to be looked at more closely if this is the road that the municipalities wish to consider. So in terms of the next steps, we would, we have some information that we've presented to you this evening, and what we'd like to obtain is some sort of feedback, and we've already made some notes here based on the couple of questions that we had earlier. So questions on what we've done to date. Any questions, we may not be able to answer them all tonight, but certainly would be able to provide you with responses to those later on, after tonight's meeting. Some of your feedback on some of the challenges and issues and on working together. And the next steps, once we get those, we're going to look at what might be some feasible collaboration options for consideration, and then how those might be implemented. And I think that completes my section of the presentation.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Derek, very much. And so it really, now we kind of transition into, we're going to throw it back to all of the attendees here. And we've prepared a couple of questions that we're hoping we get some feedback on and some discussion on. And you'll note that Derek, myself, and I know and all the local staff that work in waste management, we're going to try and take some notes and make sure we capture some of the thoughts and I guess input we're getting. So in that light, I'll start it off with the first question that I'm going to throw out to the group. Any comments on the findings, and specifically, we did talk about some of these things that in terms of what was brought up and some of those questions, but do the costs, do they make sense to the attendees? Any surprises that you saw, and how does that outlook look? I know for myself, that was one thing that really struck me whenever, as Derek was putting together the report, is just, how many things are changing between now and 2044. There's such a real shift in what's happening regionally. And it really does, I guess, reiterate the need to really start thinking and planning strategically. So with that, I guess I'll open it up. I'll throw it back to Mr. Warden to kind of, I guess, lead us and bring some questions forward.
Okay, thanks very much, Derek, for your presentation, and Ben, for the question that you just put forward. But can you take down the screen so I can have an opportunity to see most of the members of council? Okay, thank you. So it will be open not only to county council members, but to any member of council that is in the lower two municipalities. So there was a question thrown out there. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Derek. I'm sort of sidetracked thinking about this as we've gone through Derek's presentation. How much time was spent on discussing the sharing of thoughts on preparing for the recycling transition? And as I've been brought up to speed by Mr. Froats in North Dundas, the impact of organics on our waste at the landfill, the volume that the landfill that's used up by organics, and the need to look at other methods of dealing with that. I'm just wondering about those two items. How in depth were those two things discussed? I think they're imperative that we have a good handle on those things as we worry about the loss of landfill space. And those two things are things that we will be able to almost immediately affect the life of our landfills by dealing with that. And that's my question, is about how much discussion was on with that. And the other thing I want to ask Mr. Warden, if you'd allow me, I appreciate understanding the costs, but I think it would have been fairer for all if we had an understanding of the revenues at the same time, because that leaves some questions to be answered if someone's looking at strictly the cost of managing our waste. But I turn that back to you, Mr. Warden. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Derek, did you want to, or Ben, attempt that? Go ahead.
I'll start with I'll start and then I'll throw it to Derek to kind of supplement anything that I answer with. With respect to the discussion on transition, I think regionally, if I may, we all agree that we really want to do it together as a group and look at it and kind of transition at the same time, because the province is providing, I would suggest, some looking for feedback and input from municipalities in terms of when they want to transition, and we've identified that we want to move together, regardless of where we are after this work is done and whatever decisions kind of come out of that. So I would say that's about the extent of our discussions thus far, is just reiterating that we really want to work as a collaboratively, regardless if it's as one entity of some sort, or just on our own still. So hopefully that answers your question there. And with respect to organics, I think that's going to come into play, and maybe we can park that question for now. But you know, this is the kind of things we're trying to get from council. Is that something that all the local municipalities are really interested in terms of an area that we can focus some of our future collaboration opportunities? So with that, Derek, is there anything more to add to that one? And maybe you can comment on the revenue, because your organization really was deep into the financial side of things.
Yes, of course. With respect to the revenue, the numbers you see for the net present value are net of revenue. The numbers we showed for 2021 are gross, meaning that we haven't considered the revenue. And in most cases, the revenue does not. What we were attempting to do is show what your gross costs are, and depending on which way you go, then the revenue would come into play. So for the net present value, we considered, once we had all the gross costs, we deducted the net present value of the revenues that were assumed to be gained over that period of time, and also any money you had sitting in the bank account in a reserve today. So as of 2021, what you see for the net present value is net of all your revenues, a net of any cash you have available at your disposal to be spent. And then that was used to calculate the unit costs for, or estimate what the unit cost might be for your various services.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fraser, does that answer your question, or do you have any further comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Derek. It's an answer, that's for sure. It's not an answer that I consider answering my question, because I know that there's revenues to be had, albeit small. But whenever we look at, let's say, the cost of picking up recycling and the recycling, that's there's a cost on revenue, as minor as it is, or maybe it's a negative revenue. And if we look at the cost of recycling, picking up recycling, it doesn't truly show to me what the net cost is, if it's strictly a cost without considering those costs. Project, and I appreciate the effort, and seeing the gross numbers supports some of the direction we need to follow. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm curious about the suite of possible services that could be offered to clients. And if you could maybe provide a little more detail.
I'm meeting right now. I've called Debbie. You go, sir. All right, bye. Sorry
about that. Go ahead, Karma, again.
Oh, you want me to repeat that?
No, not all of it. I don't know if you had something at the end, Ben, or was that question clear enough, or do you want to repeat it?
I missed it, to be quite honest, Derek. If you captured it.
I missed it as well.
Yeah.
So, Derek, you were referring to the potential to offer a suite of services to the clients so that they could choose which waste management, which waste services that they would take advantage of, and presumably would then pay for accordingly. I'm interested in that. If you could please provide a few more details.
Sure. What this would be is the concept of having what we would refer to as a base level of service across the board for all municipalities. So pretty much everybody gets that service for, at whatever price that is. But if a particular municipality wishes to have something additional, then they can have that for an additional fee. So those additional service can be things like, I would like to have, monthly collection of leaf and yard waste from May to November, or I would like to have curbside pickup of bulky waste items. Those kinds of things that would be that can be costed out through whether it's a tender or whichever mechanisms that are eventually selected in terms of collaboration. But the fundamental concept is that there'd be a base service that everyone gets that meets the needs of all the communities. And then where there's specific needs or requirements or preferences, then there can also be sort of a menu you can choose from for a fee to be able to give those services to your residents in those communities. And a good example would be, for example, organics collection. Now, right now, based on the provincial guidelines, there's no requirement. You're not obligated to provide organics collection, but as indicated earlier, you do have the option. That's probably maybe 30 to 40% of your garbage bag is organics. So if you can divert that, then you can translate that into extended life at the landfill, but it comes at a cost. So you may only want to do that in certain areas, not in the rural areas, but maybe in pockets of higher density residents and so on. So that's this sort of concept of having a base service where you get everything you get sort of today, and then if you want more, you can add to it on a community-specific basis.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warden, if I may, just a quick follow-up. So you're not talking about offering, I'm thinking of, for example, large item collection, where not every household would need to take advantage of that. I was just wondering if it could be extended to an individual by individual household basis.
Yes, that could certainly be done. Some municipalities do it for a fee. You just put a tag on the items and they get picked up. So if a resident does not have the means to deliver that item to the landfill, then it may be more convenient for them to purchase a tag at the convenience store and have it out at the curb and it'll be collected. Some municipalities I know, they would do a certain number of those items for free. So there's no additional charge. You call ahead of your garbage day, 3 days, 4 days in advance. You let them know the address, what you have to put out. You put it out at the curb, and you're allowed a certain number for the year. And after that, you'd have to make your own arrangements or perhaps pay by putting a tag on it. So there are different permutations on how it could be done to accommodate the different needs of the residents.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I do see 3 other individuals with their hand up, so I'll go to Stephanie and then Archie and then Steve. And then Brenda. We can't hear you, Stephanie, at all. Still can't.
All right. How about now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that any better? Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm having trouble like karma, so I'm like on multiple devices here. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Warden. I have a comment and I have a question. So I'm chair of the South Glengarry Environment Committee, and we did review the draft of the document. And one item that I just wanted to share with Derek, just because I don't think our feedback got fully captured, was one comment that is very popular within our committee, but also something that we hear very generally from a lot of residents is about wanting to have more frequent recycling pickup versus, from biweekly. We're biweekly currently. There's a lot of interest to having weekly. But then with all the comments Derek made about where we don't know what's going to happen with the full producer responsibility, I'm not really sure where that comment goes for the future, but I just wanted to share that's something that there's a lot of interest in. My question, though, comes, so with the report, you know, there's lots of great information in terms of what it costs to bring things to the landfill. But one thing I find that is missing, and it would be helpful for when we're trying to decide, you know, what's the benefit? I mean, obviously there's always the environmental benefit to reduce our waste and to divert. But in terms of the cost benefit, I find it really hard to get a sense of what's the cost per ton of having a landfill. So of, you know, building the landfill, running the landfill, and then closing the landfill. I mean, like, we're looking at some organics diversion strategies now. We have a sense of how much those cost per ton, but it's really hard to compare that back to what is the cost of that ton if it were going to the landfill instead. And I don't know if that's information that perhaps I missed in the document, or if that's something that you could provide more clarity on, please.
Through you, Mr. Yep. Thank you. Yes, what I can perhaps add is that the cost per ton that you see in the report, those consider the efforts that are underway right now, for example, to get extensions to the landfill site. So you already have landfill sites that have been, let's say, for want of a better term, paid for. So what you're looking at going forward is, what do you need to either keep those going or to extend them if they're getting close to closure. And if they're going to be closed, then it doesn't matter how much capacity there is in a site. As long as you have a landfill site and you own it, every municipality has an obligation to ensure that all of the post-closure requirements, all of environmental protection, monitoring, all of those things are going to be paid for. So it doesn't matter how much capacity you have. That's an obligation that you've got, a liability that you've got going forward. But when you look at the capacity that's remaining, some municipalities are at the point where they've got 2 years left and they are investing dollars into those extensions. Those dollars have been included in the cost of their particular disposal cost per ton. Unless there are additional expenses or different costs related to the landfill extensions that we are not aware of, then the report as it stands would have or should have those costs already built in to the cost per ton. Now, if you are going to go, say, implement or get organics involved to divert waste, then what it would mean is that whatever capacity you have at the landfill will be extended for a period of time. So instead of perhaps closing in 10 years, it may close in 13 years instead. So that's the benefit of having the diversion program. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I hope I gave you more information. If there's more, then we can certainly, more specific on the cost, we can certainly provide that information to the group after tonight.
Yeah, I think, again, like in our case where we could potentially expand a landfill, I guess what it sounds like is that there's information that you've collected from some of the other municipalities who are looking at extending, so they have more clarity on what those expansion costs are. And so I guess it sounds like the information is there. It's just, it's difficult, like in our position, to extract that information back out of the report. So yeah, that's probably something I know for myself I would find beneficial. Next step. Thank you.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. So we do have quite a few questions still coming. So I would ask everyone to try and get their questions as short as possible, and then Derek can answer them, or Ben. I'll move to Archie, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden, and other county council and Lord municipality members. It's a lot of information there. It's, it gives us, I think, an overall view of the cost of landfills, and this is where I'm going to get to. Why are we still talking landfills? Has there been any exploration, the feasibility of an SDG and surrounding areas, probably the city of Cornwall, in incinerators. If we're going to go this route and we're going to go with a united front with SDG, I think we need to expand and think outside the box and go with incinerators. There's no mention of it in here at all, and I'm just wondering why. Has there been any? Have you given any thought to this? Have you given this any, feasibility as whether or not, with 100 and some thousand people with SDG in Cornwall, and double, triple that with surrounding areas, if that's a feasibility at all? Did you look at that at all, incinerators, and whether it's a workable solution for our area?
Thank you, Archie. Go ahead, Derek or Ben.
Maybe I'll start and then I'll throw it over to you, Derek, because you're obviously an industry expert compared to me. So, in terms of actually kind of looking at the feasibility of incineration, that's a little bit outside quite frankly, the scope of the assignment. Really, we're trying to understand, or we're trying to get Derek to give us a good picture in terms of what and where we can work together. And I'm not suggesting that's not a great idea and something that comes from potentially some collaboration together. But I guess what I'm trying to say, Councillor Mellon, is that incineration, we've actually had kind of at the working group level some discussions and some chats. I know Linda from North Glengarry is a huge proponent of incineration and really is kind of looking to what's out there in terms of plants and things that are for smaller scale volumes, but a little bit, quite frankly, outside the scope of the work, just because this is more of, I would say, the 30,000 foot look at how can we work together. And I would suggest respectfully, if it comes to be that, for example, we kind of, our path leads us towards looking at shared disposal together, then to me, that's when we start looking at not only kind of how do we use the resources we have, but how do we plan for the future, which maybe does include something like incineration. So Derek, does that kind of capture where we were, or is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it does, and it's actually a good point that that was raised, that you could that you can work together, but the more you have in the group, or the bigger it is, the more critical mass you have, that you can, some things that are not feasible at an individual or local level can become feasible as a group. And so it is a good point that that you can begin to look at those kinds of technologies if you get bigger in terms of a collaboration. So, but you're right. So Ben, I think you've hit it on the head. It's getting the collaboration and seeing where that goes, and then depending on how that comes out, then you can see what might be possible in terms of technologies that could be applied.
Okay, thank you, Archie. Does that answer your question?
More or less. I think it's sort of putting the cart before the horse, but it'll do for now. We got to get the collaboration first, but it's nice to know what we're collaborating on. But thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you, Archie. So we still have at least 4 more people have questions. So I'll go to Steve, then Brenda, then Brian, then Kirsten. So go ahead, Steve.
Right, thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, County Council, for inviting us to this session. Really appreciate it. And thanks, Derek, for your presentation. When I look at it, it's a really good picture of our current state. I guess what many of us are struggling to think through is, well, I come from North Stormont first and foremost, and so we're the smallest in terms of number of stops. So the things that tend to, I think, be our areas of vulnerability would be our economy of scale and emergency situations, because those are the things that will potentially be the biggest opportunities or the biggest hit for us if we have a truck breakdown prematurely or something like that. And that's really what I guess I'd love to see is, I don't know whether through your analysis you're able to highlight where you think some of our opportunities might be to cut costs, and to what degree. Like, are we talking 5%, 10%? So we can start to say, how big is the piece of the pie? I mean, the size of our municipality being the smallest also gives us somewhat of a unique flexibility to adapt quickly according to the needs of our municipality. And I think in collaborating, there would be an expectation of economy of scales, but what may also come with that might be we have to take on things that we otherwise may not have as a municipality. So I'd want to, you kind of speak to that a little bit in terms of the menu of services. I don't think anybody wants to increase costs unless we, we can show a really good effect on the environment as a result. We're all probably looking to reduce costs, and what would be really helpful, I think, is to, if you could expose for us as each municipality where you think our areas of opportunity exist, and start to estimate for us where how big you think the savings opportunity might be. And maybe we wouldn't take on savings per se. Maybe what we would do is we'd add additional services for the same cost. So, but I still think it comes down to where do you see the savings for each of the municipalities, savings opportunities for each of the municipalities, and how big is that savings likely to be?
Go ahead, Ben.
If I can quickly take it, and thank you, Councillor Densham, for the question and comment. I just again kind of want to reiterate, we're not. I think that there's the opportunity to kind of to reflect on some of those costs individually at each municipality, but really what this is, kind of coming back to what we talked about before, that this is intended to be leading the 30,000-foot view, and a great example that you raised is things like equipment and trucks, because right now we're challenged that because each individual municipality owns that truck, we can't share that resource. But for example, if we kind of got some feedback tonight from council that there's an interest to maybe kind of share the fleet, and how do we share that fleet, and then what does that mean financially for each municipality? That's the kind of thing we want to take away from today. So great points. I don't think you're going to get a, if I call it a service delivery review, or North Stormont's going to understand XYZ from this study, but rather, through some work together with other municipalities, North Stormont, stands to gain this kind of savings because here's what we're able to achieve with these economies of scale, whatnot. So hopefully that answers your question, or gives you a little bit of an understanding of kind of where we're taking this work.
Yeah, a little bit. Thanks, Ben. And I guess the question is, who does that next layer of analysis sit with? Is that so? Are you suggesting that we do that within our own municipalities to take a look at, if our trucks are sitting idle 25% of the time, that implies that there's an opportunity to share that resource. But if our trucks are active 100% of the time, then sharing them is probably not necessarily going to buy us anything except for backup in emergency situations. So I guess that's where I would want to go next, is to see where specifically might each of our municipalities benefit, and to what degree.
Yeah, fair enough. That good points.
Okay, thank you for that. I will move to Councillor Noble, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm going to bounce off Councillor Mellon's idea, and yes, I've spoken to him, and we're both quite in favor of incinerators. We understand there's a large cost to it, but I don't know about you guys. I'm pretty hands-on, much to the chagrin of some people, so I spend time at different locations, including the landfill, Dean. I've been there probably about 4 times with garbage each time, and it's really not an enjoyable thing to look at, and it's really hard to believe that in this day and age, this is the best that we've still come up with, is putting our trash on the ground and then covering it in dirt, pretend it doesn't exist. So at the very least, I'm really hoping that after this, we do start the collaboration. We really all get together, even if it's just one person from each county, and we talk about sharing costs, or at least the Norths and Souths get together. If we agree that we can't afford an incinerator or waste energy project, which would be an amazing system to have as well, we look at other options like I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but the Slayer XL from Edge Innovations out of the States, but there's a dealer in Ottawa, that if we're going to continue with landfills, that at the very least take something like this that will take 95% of our trash and spit it up and spit it out. And yes, it doesn't reduce the waste, but it certainly doubles or triples the lifetime, of your landfill. So if we have to stick with that idea and we all have a landfill, then instead of it closing in 3 years or 5 years, maybe it could buy us some time. But again, please please consider that there must be some other way to do this. Recycling may have seen its time, and certainly telling people to stop buying stuff has not worked either.
Okay, thank you. Ben or Derek, is there any comments to that, or just does that we're accepted as a comment? Thank you.
Nope, yeah.
Okay, then I'll move to Councillor McGillis.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Warden. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I was going to bring up the same idea in terms of alternative waste management. I sat on a couple of waste management committees throughout the years in the 80s and the 90s, and nobody wants a landfill site. The cost of starting one, keeping it maintained, and then once it gets to the maximum certificate of approval, it has to be buried. Then you have to go out with buffers, and you have to go with leachate, and sometimes you have to acquire other properties or expropriate. I was going to mention the same thing that I heard earlier, as was incineration. Incineration is a very costly way to go. You have to have a lot of the communities involved in that, and that was part of the problem with the landfill issues. During my time is discussing, nobody wants a landfill, not a lot of NIMBYs out there, and for good reason. We've seen what happened with the city of Cornwall, and some of the leachate went into at least one property that I know of, and they had to purchase the property. So nobody really wants to get involved in a new landfill, but I know we should be looking maybe at a mega landfill again. Incineration, 96% of the garbage or waste goes into an incinerator. And not only that, the incineration is the way it is with the scrubbers and everything, and the technology they have today has improved a lot over the years. And that it's something to look at. I think if we can get maybe even Ottawa involved in bigger urban areas, maybe it's worthwhile looking into. Incineration was, I think, back in the 90s was like, we were looking at one at $50 million. So that's just to give you an idea of what the costs were back then. So I don't know if we'd have to do it in a big way, and we could get a lot of communities involved in municipalities. It's the only way to do it. I don't think throwing garbage in the ground is, it's no way of doing things. Municipalities throughout Ontario looking at incineration. So I think that's one thing we should reach out and do some investigating on.
Okay, thank you. They will
take a comment.
Yep, they'll take those comments into consideration. Thank you, Councillor McGillis. I'll move to Councillor Gardner, but before I do, if there's any staff members at the lower tier, I see your hand, Jeff. Yep. At the lower tier that have questions, please put up your hand also, and I will acknowledge those.
There's one thing I forgot, Mr. Warden, to mention. There's a recovery cost too. Like you can recover the steam, which you can generate into electricity too as well, and recover some of that cost through incineration. And a lot of municipalities have done that over the years, and it pays for a lot of the cost for the incineration. So there's something to think about there too. Again, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Gardner, please.
Thanks, Warden Prevost. Just a couple of comments. My comments were around incineration. I understand that most people look at a huge scale. That it'd be interesting to see if we could scale down. And I think that's been duly noted. I think we need to be innovative if we're going to be united and look at different ways of doing things. And I think we also need to look at the areas around us, including Cornwall, and what their projected waste problems will be in the near future. And maybe it's a case of the first out of the gate is the one that can benefit. But I just had a couple of comments about some of the things I'd like to see in as we progress in this conversation. One is the diversion rates around different items. So we've talked about the green items. I know around Christmas time we talk about wrapping paper and what can and cannot be accepted at the curb for recycling. And I also maybe we need to look at transitional pathing. So we saw the information tonight in the report about lifespans of the landfills and what is required and the expense associated with it. It would be really interesting to see what the transition would be from what we currently have to what a united front would be, and how it would be kind of pathed out. So maybe in one municipality it's the case that there's this item, that item, that item, that all of a sudden gets diverted county-wise, and then we kind of see how this would look. Because I think most municipalities, I know for myself, you're looking at it and you're going, oh my goodness, we have this investment, these contracts already in play. We really need to see a transitional way that this could unfold. Because obviously it's not just going to be 1 minute it's the municipality doing it, next minute it's the upper tier doing it. So I think that would be an interesting part of the conversation to maybe see how this could unfold.
Okay, Ben?
If I may, Mr. Warden, and actually that kind of leads into some of the other questions we had, and really the question is this, and I'm going to quickly share my screen and I'll turn it off very shortly. But one of the questions we wanted to ask the group, and to Councillor Gardner's point, that's really what we want to take away from tonight, is understanding, like, because that is part of this analysis, is pathing that out and understanding how we get there. But we really need to understand, because you folks that are attending tonight are the decision makers. You're the ones that need to sit around your table and kind of commit to where, I mean, I guess not today, but at some point in the future, if as we do this, that's the commitment we're going to be looking for. So really the question is, we're happy to path that out. What are we pathing out? Are we pathing out complete collaboration across all 6 municipalities where everything kind of works together as one? Or are there some municipalities that are potentially less, I guess, less supportive of some types of the collaboration? So that's really some of the I guess this, if I'm going to reflect on anything, this is the crux of what we're trying to get out of the group tonight, is what forms of collaboration are you supporting and why? And what forms do you feel less comfortable supporting and why?
So if I may, Warden Prevost, just quickly, Ben, I think in my mind, it would be interesting to see, and maybe this is where we turn to Derek, if there is a case study where you had the upper and lower tier, where the lower tier had their collection processes in play, and then there was some transition, and what a case, like present a case study of what that would look like, how that unfolds. Because I think there's multiple needs around the table, and I think just having a view of what that looks like may help further the discussion. Just my thought.
Go ahead, Derek.
So thank you. Yes, there are different structures, if you will, where you could have some components of the waste management system, namely, usually disposal is at a much more coordinated group sort of level, and collection can be at a local level. So you do have that existing. I believe Lambton County is an example of that. I don't have all the details on that, but I think that's what they've got right now, where the municipalities do the collection themselves, and the county does all of the waste disposal, and they make the decisions on the disposal. As far as sort of consistency in terms of materials that are collected and recycled, I think what's going to drive all of that would be the producers once they take over. And that's really the reason why the province has said to the producers they have to take it. Because we have materials right now that are coming to us as consumers that are perhaps ending up in the recycled bin, but they're not really recyclable, so they end up in the landfill. And what they're going to do is try to get producers to take responsibility for those. And then by virtue of doing that, they would change up the packaging. And therefore, some things would be eliminated and some would be recyclable. So we are not sure, from a municipality's perspective, we are not quite sure how that's going to look going forward. And what we do know is, as part of the transition, is whatever service levels you've got in place at this point, for example, if it's bi-weekly collection or weekly collection, they have to commit to that at least until the end of 2025. And then after that, they'll have to make changes, whatever changes they see fit. So I think there's still a lot of unknowns with respect to that. But as far as collaboration, you could collaborate on one or more components, and you could structure it differently with SDG involved or Cornwall involved, depending on what component of the system you want to do the collaboration on.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on. I have Councillor Manley and then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My connection's bad here, so I'm just looking. I know North Glengarry is really looking sort of for what the timeline for phase 3 and 4 is going to be.
Can't hear you, Councillor Manley. You broke up.
Sorry, I think I'm back there. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We're looking for a timeline on phase 3 and 4.
Okay, I'll get that in. Go ahead, Derek.
Maybe just finish it for him. I believe that North Glengarry is looking for a timeline on phase 3 and 4 because we have a recycling facility that is losing significant amount of money. So, you know, unless there's a solution going forward that would help out that, you know, that maybe other municipalities send their recycling there or something like that, then North Glengarry will be forced to do something. So we just don't want to be holding on to something for much longer that's losing significant amounts of money.
Okay, thank you, Derek.
Yes, I think phases 3 and 4 are going to follow tonight. The next steps really is for us to look at the comments that we gather up tonight and see how we can get into the collaboration. What I can say based on the information that we've gathered and discussions we've had is that the North Glengarry facility is right now at maximum capacity. And therefore, it would be difficult to bring in others into more than you have already into that facility. Sort of coupled with that, you also have the pending transition, which would mean producers would be responsible for processing of recyclable materials. So the question, it is an issue, and it's a pressing one, of course, that the issue is, what role, if any, would the producers expect North Glengarry to play in the processing, whether as a contract service, or maybe they'll just move the recycling processing elsewhere, and then your facility would become obsolete in that case. So we don't have those answers today. But
I'm just not sure where you got your numbers on us being at max capacity. Right now, we are only doing the township of North Glengarry. In the past, we had the complete recycling of the township of Russell, the city of Hawkesbury, South Glengarry, North Stormont, and we still were not at full capacity. So it's not a capacity. It's at a capacity right now with the amount of staff that we have, because we're just servicing ourselves. But in the past, we've handled more recycling than most facilities in the area. So I guess I'm just not sure where those numbers came from. And I know that 3 and 4 will come after this, but I guess we're looking for a timeline of when 3 and 4 would be completed with answers. We have to make decisions on our plant before next budget season. So that's, at this point, that's why we're kind of asking, but we are definitely not at max capacity.
Okay, sure. 3 and 4 would probably be in the next couple of months we're looking at based on our timeline. In terms of our information on the capacity, all I can say is based on the conversations we've had with staff, that's what we gathered. So if we are mistaken, I apologize for that. We would reconfirm those and see where that is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Manley, I presume that answered your question. Okay, thank you. I will move to Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I don't know what I did right there, but I think some of the problems that I'm having, at least to answer Mr. DeHaan, having those pointed questions, which are, I guess, are appropriate questions, but it's so much of the unknown in that when you're asking the pointed question of what collaborations do you support and what, and you know, and then I guess the more pointed question is to explain ourselves as to why, if you know, give our own reasons as to why we wouldn't support some collaboration. I'm not sure that we necessarily need to do that, but as far as collaborations, I mean, I could sit here and say I support all the collaborations, and then you do a model and you say, okay, it's going to cost $7 million per township. Well, then maybe I don't support any collaborations. I mean, I don't. There's a lot of, and you're trying to work without any information. You're trying to get information from us, but we're also being asked to provide answers as to what paths we'd like to go down without any of the real costing to even see what it is that we're offering or what impact it's going to have. And I know it's the chicken and the egg, but I'm having trouble sort of lending my belief that we could have collaboration. I'm okay with sharing our trucks. I'm okay with using some of our landfill space or any of the other myriad of options that we've had placed upon us to try and pick them. And I'm not sure, it may only be us, but we haven't really fully reached a consensus at our council level as to what we would have with all of these options put forward that we would like to continue down that path. So I'm not saying it's an unreasonable question, but it's a difficult question to sit here and answer as two of the members of a 5-person council. So, and then in fairness to what, and echoing sort of what Councillor McDonald, my Councillor Warden said earlier, and I mean this with no disrespect, Mr. Ali, but, and of course to do your job, you had to make some assumptions, but some of the assumptions we may not all agree with, or we may not all, as I said earlier, be continuing thinking in that sort of similar manner in which you had discussions with staff. So there's a little bit of and I know you had to start somewhere and you had to go, and I appreciate that, to make a model, but there may be some inherent flaws in that model not sitting at our particular council tables, if you take it from our perspective. So I find it, again, I mean this with in no punitive way at all, Mr. Ali, but as Councillor McDonald just pointed out, you are working under the assumption that their landfill is a capacity. The mayor had just explained that they're nowhere near capacity. So some of the things, some of our base points make it difficult to buy into exactly which model or which lane we'd like to go with. It doesn't really provide any answers, and I'm not saying that I have any great insight, but it does make it difficult, at least for myself individually, to decide which collaborations I like to see. I would certainly like to have maybe a bit more time to, or even, and I don't expect you to make 50 different models, but maybe, as Ben keeps alluding to, saying the 6-mile model up in the air, maybe we could have if everyone buys into complete collaboration at a very high level, it would cost probably this more, or some sort of high level costing menu. And then say, if everyone was to pick and choose, then that model gets skewed by 35% or whatever, making the assumptions that you're making. But at least we have more information to see what way we would commit to try and get a concrete agreement, or if we want an agreement at all. I mean, right now we're ordering a steak, and I don't know if you're going to bring it to me and tell me it's going to cost me $7 million, if it's going to have the level of cookness that I'd like, if the base level of service is going to be what Councillor Warden and I could agree on, all these sort of things. So I don't know how to commit and answer your questions fairly, Ben. So this is sort of where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, if I may, and that's, I completely appreciate that, and I think the intent of that, the kind of pointed but very broad question, was really to understand if there was anything there was a stop, you know, there's a barrier that we needed to respect as we move forward, because the next question we had to pose to council really, I think is the question that, you know, that to your point, Councillor Armstrong, what you need to reflect on, and what we really would love to know is if, you know, I like the feedback we've got, and that's really, I really appreciate the feedback we got. But, you know, these are kind of three kind of high level questions again that we were thinking, if it's, you know, if it's saving the money short and long term with the same level of service, would you support it? I think, you know, for most people around the table, the answer is going to be yeah, of course we would. Why wouldn't we? But if it saves money but decreases the level of service you have in one way or another, would you support it? So, for example, South Glengarry has X bag limits to it. We have to create a common level of service and then understand what the cost implications of that level of service is. But it might be a decrease of level of service, but it might save South Glengarry money. And so does South Glengarry support that type of collaboration? But the alternative, and I think Councillor Densham had kind of alluded to this as well, if it doesn't save money but improves the level of service, do you support it? So, and again, I respect, you know, say it doesn't save money could be 1 million to 20 million, and I totally respect that, you know, the decisions need to be made based on realistic values. But maybe just kind of throwing these questions out here, does this spur any conversation or any other thoughts from the members of council that are attending tonight?
Well, if I may, Mr. Warden, I mean, I think, without speaking for everybody, but I guess I would in a manner, I think the level of service is sort of non-negotiable. I don't think anybody's looking to go backwards, as you correctly assumed. But you hit the nail on the head as well. If it costs a little bit more money, sure. If it costs a lot more money, well, then there's discussions that need to be made. I mean, it's again, and there's also, you've got 37 people here. There could be 37 different opinions as to how we go about these sort of things, and it's difficult to get the consensus. And you know, again, for as Councillor Warden said, and for North Dundas, depending on some decisions that are made by the province, we may have a different attitude towards how it is that we want to proceed, and vice versa. Everybody could be, and you know, just as Ms. Noble's point about incinerators, I mean, information could come forward and say that that's actually a feasible manner, and well, you know, we might be all in on that as well. I mean, there's a lot of balls up in the air. I mean, so if you want the direct answer from my standpoint, at least, the level of service is non-negotiable. The cost of the municipality is variable. If it's something we feel we can accept, fine. If it's not, then we're not interested. You know, there's only so much the taxpayer can do as well, and maybe, again, as a couple of the points that were made that really hit home to me, maybe we have missed a little bit of the boat in that we're not looking at alternative methods of dealing with our waste, period, if we're going to embark on this sort of thing. But just if you think of that, just that statement alone is not going to make Councillor McDonald happy, because he's got a perfectly correct statement saying we need to know. We're stuck in a situation that we need to know by next October, sort of thing. So they're difficult questions to answer.
Okay, thank you. I will try and wrap it up with Councillor Byfeld if we can.
Thank you, Warden. Just like to make a few comments. I think the first thing, well, I think we all want to work together if we can find a common ground. I think that's going to be our biggest challenge, is finding common ground and where we feel comfortable with its level of service, it's the whole 9 yards, and perhaps before we go a lot further down the road and spending a lot of time on trying to figure out a collaboration method, is we all go back to our individual councils and see how it could apply to us as individual municipalities. Because as the statistics say, we all operate somewhat different. You know, from an experience point of view in South Dundas, I got, you know, one of the challenges I had when I got elected was to deal with the landfill situation we had here, and little did I know how many dollars it was going to cost South Dundas to deal with what we've got. We landed up closing one site. It cost us $1.8 million to cover that site. So I just want you to keep that number in mind. $1.8 million just to cover a landfill with heavy clay. You might get it cheaper if your clay's right beside you, but it's expensive. Expansion costs of $2 million, and that doesn't get you very far. The solution of incineration, you know, it sounds great, but there is one incinerator in Ontario that is not that far down the road. If you consider this side of Toronto, not that far, and that's in Durham County and Durham region, in Clarington. It still costs York region and Durham region $8 million to run that facility. So you know, it could work if everybody got together, but it takes 160,000 tons and we generate 16. So you can do the math pretty easily. I don't know, I looking at the numbers and perhaps the solution to it all is, you know, we deal with what we have for landfills and start working together on deals with private contractors. The numbers make more sense when you see them now than they did before. You know, and I know levels of service is something that everybody wants to stay equal. When you get to our point where you're spending millions of dollars and you want to maintain your service, but you have to ask people to pay more, there's pushback. And my pushback to them is I have to have the money. It's the only way this municipality or any municipality with landfill and looking forward is going to do it. So go back to your individuals and come up with what you want to do and say, you know, there's no sense in wasting a lot of time and money and effort if in the end we're just going to say, well, we can't do what we want to do, and we'll just continue on. And within the next few years, we'll be forced to do something. Somebody else might be forced to do something, and then I'm not sure how we can get to where we need to get to with our unevenness. But I know that, you know, we're in the same point as North Glengarry. You've got to make a decision. We're going to have to make it a little probably faster than all of us like to do it, but in the end, it has to be done. It's going to be done because the next election cannot be fought on how we're going to deal with landfill in South Dundas. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
Yeah, just very quickly, great point. And what I'd like to do, perhaps, you know, in the interest of time, I have one more thing I want to share with council. But perhaps that's exactly what we do is we kind of summarize this information, make sure it gets to your councils, and give you the opportunity around your local council tables to have a little bit of a deeper dive into it and provide your local perspective through those meetings.
Yep, no, I think that's the way to go. Thank you. I'm going to go to one more question or comment. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Warden. And to listen to Councillor Byvelds, Councillor Armstrong, McDonald, Noble, all of the people that spoke. I want to go back. Well, we all have challenges in front of us, some more challenges than others, but the challenges are there. And to the collaboration, to working together, to being part of the United Counties. Definitely, we need to work together on many things. But I'm going to go back to the recycling, the transition, the diversion of organics, and to Councillor McDonald's concern about the rare facility in North Glengarry. I think these are starting off points in the discussion. I think as opposed to jumping in wholesale and saying we're going to collaborate on everything, we're going to come to a consensus on the services we're going to offer to the citizens in SDG. I think I'm much more open to the idea of steps. Let's work together on certain things. Let's get this recycling transition. This is going to be new to all of us. So let's work together on finding the best way for each of us and sharing of ideas. And not so much doing the same thing, but the sharing of ideas so we have the best, most efficient process possible. And the same with the organics. I go back to what I learned from Mr. Protz. These are things that I think we can all share in the effort and as the first step in this process, if there is to be a process of collaborating on landfills. But it's the sharing of ideas. I think we need to be comfortable with that before we end up sharing the whole system. And again, thank you, Mr. Warden, for allowing me that.
Okay, great, thank you. Between Mr. Alley and Mr. Don, is that enough information? Or go ahead, Ben, sorry.
Thank you, and I recognize we want to kind of wrap things up. Just last thing I want to share. I know we've said that word a lot tonight, and I swear I'm almost done saying it. It was just coincidental, and this is something I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. And I think just based on the discussions tonight that I hear that there's a willingness to work with, even though not within our county, but our partner. This was published in the Seaway News just last week. It was in 1969. There was a comment in the local paper. The anti-pollution committee member, and this is with the city of Cornwall. This is in the city of Cornwall. Ralph Carrera told his colleagues that it was time for the city to start thinking about collaborating with neighboring municipalities to build a regional dump. So, 1916. This kind of discussion's been going on since then, and really what I'm hearing tonight is that I hear that there is a willingness to consider working with the city of Cornwall and making sure that that's part of our kind of analysis and overall view. And I guess maybe I'll throw it out to the group and tell me if I've misunderstood or not heard that there is that kind of desire right now. Obviously, our focus is SDG. But you know, the city is kind of strategically located for us, and there may be some opportunities to work with the city on some of these solutions as well. And you know, the larger kind of disposal and the lead to potentially incineration and those kinds of things, I think plays very well into that kind of involvement from the city. So again, I throw it out there. If anybody disagrees with that thought process, let me know.
Okay, Ben, can you take down the screen again? Okay, thank you. I don't see any further comments or questions, so hopefully that's enough information, thoughts around the council table and the challenges that we see in the future, or for all our municipalities that are coming in the future. But so Ali, I guess, Mr. Ali, what's our next steps from here, or Ben, if somebody can answer that in regards to when you return or come back in respect to coming back with a different report?
I'll take this one, and then Derek, feel free to jump in. We will prepare something, you know, a brief one-pager for your local municipalities, kind of summarizing these things and giving your local municipalities a chance to kind of, we'll call it formally respond. What we heard tonight, or what I heard tonight, was there's really a willingness to consider everything, but we have to be cognizant of, you know, there are many things that need to fall into place to get there. But it sounds like council really, you know, there's a willingness to figure out how we can work together, or if there is value in working together. So with that, I think it opens up a lot of doors for us to start putting some numbers together. And then the last thing I think we'd be looking for is some of the numbers or the concerns with the information that's presented in the report versus what council understands locally with, you know, processing capacity, some of the costs, et cetera, you know, please, you know, ask your local staff to you know, provide the right information to, or more accurate or more current information to Derek, and we'll make sure that report reflects what's going on today. So Derek, did I miss anything there?
No, I think you've captured it, and we will certainly go back. I mean, if there are areas that need to be revisited, if there's new information or incorrect assumptions, then we'll do that to make sure that it's as accurate as possible based on the best available information.
Okay, thank you. So Ben, I didn't hear or see any negative in regards to working together with the city of Cornwall, so I would probably ask to have that in the project, I guess, as we move forward. So if there's no other questions or comments, on behalf of County Council, I would like to thank the lower tier municipalities and all their staff to join us here this evening. And thank you to County Council and our staff here at county level. And thank you, Mr. Ali, for your report here this evening, and Ben for your comments also that were brought out here this evening. So if there's nothing else, I will ask for an adjournment by resolution. Madam Clerk, if you would please.
It's moved by Councillor Wirt, seconded by Councillor Byvelds, that council adjourn to the call of the chair.
Thank you. I'll ask County Council, all in favor? The motion is carried. Thanks very much, everyone. Have enjoyed the rest of your evening.